Welcome to Dinner with Artists. I'm one of your co-hosts. That's right, it's two for the price of one. I'm Todd Pearson. I'm joined by my friend, my sister from another mister, curator extraordinaire, Rose Frederick.
Well, hey,
Rose, how are
Todd.
you?
Oh, that was great. Look at us, two podcasts down, and we already have an intro.
Yeah,
I
it's good to
know.
see you.
It's so good to see you too, even over technology. Oh, technology is a big thing tonight, isn't it?
It's very big, and we
Mm,
have a phenomenal guest
mm.
that I will introduce right now. She's a painter living and working here in Denver, Colorado. You can check out her exquisite work via her website, AnnMorgan.art, and you can follow her on Instagram at EchoPod. And Morgan, so good to see you.
Hi.
I have been an acquaintance, a friend of yours for a couple years now. I first met you through a mutual friend of ours, I believe, Dan Drossman, one of my favorite people of all time. And I got to take in your work for the first time a little over, I guess, about a year and a half ago at Next Gallery. I would like you to take a moment and talk a little bit about what you do as a painter. I mentioned in the intro that you were a painter, but I kind of want to take a moment and have you explain the kind of painting that you do and then the interesting tool that you use to make these paintings.
Well, I am a painter now, and that's what my degree is in, but I took a 20-year detour into technology. So I spent that time being a web developer. I worked on the UI of software programs when I worked at a software company. I've done a lot of code, and then eventually I managed everything digital at an association before I decided to paint again. So all that time and all that investment in technology definitely made me, I think, through a computer. That's definitely how I think now. So I do all of my sketch work and prep work using the digital programs that I used during that time, like Photoshop, Illustrator, and that's what I started doing. And then my interest in technology led me to working with AI. I really like new stuff and playing with different things that comes out. And so I trained my own model using one of the AI platforms at the time. They've changed a little bit, so the exact thing that I used isn't available anymore, but mine still works. And I just work with it kind of as a magic eight ball a little bit. You can use text prompts to get images. I think many people have used this at this point. And then I layered those in Photoshop along with my own digital sketches, and I project those digital images that I save as files. And I use a regular old projector like I used to use in my professional life to give demos. And I project them on the canvases and I sketch the first layer, usually in the dark, just to make the projection stand out a little more. Um, and then I paint. So I do traditional oil painting on top of that. And then I have a tendency to take a picture, throw it back in AI or in Photoshop, reproject that edited image, paint again in the dark, and just kind of use those layers to build up the final image of the painting.
Okay, what people can't see on the radio or a podcast is that we are looking into Anne's studio here on Zoom. And she is this beautiful silhouette with your long flowing hair. And it's totally pitch dark in there, which she told us it was pitch dark in there because she has all these paintings in front of her light switch. But okay, so the so many things you just said. So all right, I'm a person that really suspects that fax machines work with unicorn tears. So it's kind of blowing my mind right now that your 20-year deviation from the art path went into programming and coding when so many artists are just, unless you're a photographer and you're already kind of thinking that way, so many artists are just fumbling around. Like, what is in your brain that allows you to do it and feel really comfortable about it?
I think maybe it was my introduction to technology. I had a friend who thought I would really like designing web pages, and it was the 90s, so there were about 5 things to learn. Like I actually remember him
Oh,
teaching me how to do paragraphs, I think it was, and he was like, "And we're done." So that was, it was a very long time ago. And then I just grew with that technology. I was really interested in it. And I think there are, at least with scripting languages and a lot of the other languages that I work with for coding, they're creative. It is a creative process to build something that works. Um, it's a lot like building something in the physical world. It's a lot more like being a mechanic, I think, than people would realize, at least with the kinds of things that I do. So it makes sense to my brain for sure. There's not, people think about working with computers as lots of math. And, I don't do any math. I build some things that do the math for you.
but you have to know how to build the things. Like I can put a chair together from IKEA, but right, like technology, when it works, it's fabulous. But when it's broken, you're like calling somebody because I'm out, right? But your mind is able to, or you just built it over years in your mind, this knowledge base.
Yeah, it's all through discovery. And plus, I worked at a software company. So, it's very contextual. Like
Mm.
everyone was very immersed in technology and programming and, working on the website that supported that software. And so it was all this cohesive kind of picture where it was really easy. It was really easy to learn new things in that environment. Uh, and that's who I am too. Like my first job out of college was teaching computer classes, like you do with a Bachelor of Fine Arts.
No,
And
you don't.
no, you don't. And it's funny because I actually said I knew all this stuff, and I totally didn't know any of that stuff. I only knew how to design websites. I didn't know Microsoft Word or any of the things I ended up teaching.
Oh my
Um,
God, I like you so much more right now. You just BS'd your way into a job.
I did. And I spent a lot of nights learning what I said I already knew. But I found a pattern, definitely. I think coding and art and actually learning software, it's all recognizing patterns or recreating patterns. So once I learned one software program, it was pretty easy to
Hmm.
pick up the rest in order to teach them because, the same kinds of things are kept in the same kind of menus and so on and so forth.
Interesting.
I love that.
Yeah.
Now, I've known you for a little bit and I've had the luxury of having many conversations with you. But this whole technology thing goes back even further from what I remember you telling me previous, that it incorporates technology when you were actually a young child doing art and giving your dad pieces of art to take to work with him. Talk a little bit about that.
Was your
That,
dad Bill Gates?
no, definitely not. Yeah. I don't
Okay,
even
that's
know
a
what he
fair
did at the time.
question
It
right
is.
now.
Totally.
But it is fair. His technology was he had a copy machine at work. It wasn't a Ditto that was purple. It was a Xerox with a black ink. So I would, and he worked nights. So I would leave out pieces of art and with a note to please copy this. And so he would bring back 5 copies and I would color them different and then cut them out and reassemble them and then send him one out of that many that he had made. And I would keep sending things until eventually, the copy was really bizarre and I couldn't use it anymore. And then I would start over. So it was just this process I would continue. I'm an only child. I had lots of time on my hands. So that was my first foray into technology.
Oh my God, that's so amazing. Hey, Anne, will you hang out a little bit? We're just going to take a quick break for some music and we'll be right back. And we're going to dive into that because I really think Bill Gates might have been an uncle. I think we should check that out. We'll be right back with Dinner with Artists.
Welcome back to Dinner with Artists. I'm Todd Pearson with Rose Frederick, and we are continuing our conversation with Anne Morgan. We're talking about her work and her incorporation of artificial intelligence. But before we left off at the break, we were talking about how you would incorporate technology with your early work by sending art with your dad to be copied. So this is kind of a thread that runs throughout your entire life. Like that's kind of the early start of doing things that were a little bit thinking outside the box and more abstract. And it kind of, I do kind of see this thread from your early years to where you are now and how you incorporate things.
There's a thread, and even in college, I started the projection process because I started painting large. And how do you get your sketches onto a larger canvas the way you want them? Well, you use a projector. So I commandeered a projector from the graphic design department and started painting in the dark. And at that time, there weren't files, that you would put on the projector. It was a slide projector. So I would take pictures of my computer work, which I had started to do, and get them put on slides and then project those slides onto the canvas. So it was pretty painstaking. There was a lot of daisy chaining of technology at the time. But I also went into the graphic design room and started working with Photoshop at that time and making some really interesting and weird digital sketches, and working with some of the first color printers that made things that were recognizable. So this was in the 90s when I was working on my degree. And screens were very pixelated then. So for my senior show, I wanted to incorporate that look and where my paintings were coming from. So I bought a lot of window screen and pushed the oil paint through the window screen and pulled it off. So my paintings had a pixely texture.
Oh, cool.
That was really interesting to me. It really abstracted the image as well. So I started, thinking, very digitally like that. That definitely inspired me back then. It still inspires me. It's a constant source of inspiration.
So I don't usually go around asking people their age, but okay, I'll tell you my age and this will make it easier. I'm 29. So, um, just to kind of put this in context, what years were you in college?
I started college in 1992.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I took a break in there to be in AmeriCorps Vista, and I finished up in 1998.
Nice. Okay. Okay. I think that just helps sort of like where's technology at this point because it's moving so fast.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, when I started college, there was no internet, at least not accessible to us. And then when I finished, I was a web developer. So that's how fast it moved.
Right. Yeah. That's insane.
And as fast as it was moving, you were at the ground floor of all the stuff that, the foundation of everything that we do now. You've kind of grown up essentially with all these different things that technology has provided us.
Yeah, it's interesting to look back at this point because it's solidly in the past. And right now in current culture, it's people are looking back at that time because, there was no social media, but there were these networks like this. It wasn't even called blogging then. There were diary sites. They were closed, and people are looking back at that kind of scenario, like going back to that environment rather than the social media, the open platform that we have now.
Your work is extremely large. I mean, Rose touched on it earlier that you can't even get to your light switch in the room where your office where you're at. Um, Talk about why you work so large, or what compels you to work so large.
I think there are a lot of reasons I work so large, and some of them are personal. I feel more of a connection, and I feel more of where my art comes from is physical rather than sitting down at a desk. Like sitting down at a desk is the digital part of my process, but actually painting is super physical. That's where I feel more comfortable. That's how I paint is large. I started painting large in college, and it just really stuck with me. Like it's what I do. It's how I make my work. Um, and like as far as other reasons, I think maybe women especially don't feel comfortable taking up space and letting their voice be heard. So I really like making paintings so big that you really can't ignore them. Um,
I like that.
they're very bright as well. They're very in your face. Um, and uh, I think traditional oil paintings, it just gives me room to say more. I think it lets me have room to have the paint say a lot more than it does in smaller work, at least for me personally. There's more areas to find things. Um, when I project something large, there's more room to find things in the layers and build up those layers. I have more of a relationship with a painting when they're that large.
What is a small painting for you?
I call it my small bigs, and it's 2 foot by 3 foot, and I
Oh,
can make that work. So
really?
yeah, like I like painting. One of my pieces in the last show, which is actually behind me, and the reason I can't reach the light switch is a 6 foot by 10 foot painting,
Oh
and
my
it's
God.
two panels, which are 6 foot by 5 foot, and that's the size I like to work, kind of mural size.
Wow. I'm wondering, um, and I guess it's not so much a question, but a speculation. In photography, when photography went digital, and it was a big deal going from film to digital, and I remember when National Geographic said, we're going digital, we accept digital. And I'm like, okay, it's okay now. We can accept digital photography as fine art, and it's okay, people. Do you remember that, Todd? Like when
Yeah.
National Geographic, right? That signaled it. And stuff is happening so quickly, especially with AI, and like talking to sculptors, they're looking at possibly within the next year that sculptors will no longer have to make molds of clay to turn into bronze, to do the lost wax process. That AI will create the wax. They'll just completely skip a whole step. And, programming AI already is allowing them to carve stones really precisely. There's just so much technology that sculptors are already embracing. And to me, so my question is, when do you think, two part, when do you think society is going to feel okay with this or comfortable with it? And when is like AI and technology, when does it go too far? When does it not seem like it belongs to the artist anymore?
I think it's going to take uh, art is such a human thing to do. Like, that's it's humanity, like making art. So allowing a computer to make art is pretty scary. I
Mhm.
think it's like losing control of something that makes us very human. And, and the reality is that, the neural network isn't deciding to make a piece of art. There's still a human behind that action. So, AI generated art, like even if you go to Midjourney, like I'm just going to use Midjourney as an example. So you write in a text prompt and it generates something that you ask for, even though it has human intention. That piece of art was not created by a human. It didn't have a particular intention beyond what you ask for. So I think there's a big missing piece that makes it art.
Mhm.
And I think, me using AI gets misconstrued, like I'm using AI to create the art, and I'm not. I'm using it more as like a meditation to get information and then make art out of it. So it's making something very human off of something very digital, if that
Would
makes.
yeah, would you just for people who don't know, would you explain Midjourney?
Midjourney is one of many image generation platforms, and at its basics level, you ask for something you want. Say, like I'd like a dog walking in the park with lots of trees and a couple balloons and blah blah blah, and then it will generate that image. And then what you can do is, if it's not quite right, you can say this image, but, and then you change the things verbal through text that you'd like to change, and it will generate another one.
Mm. Okay.
But
So,
go
mhm.
ahead.
No, go
Sorry.
ahead. You, Todd. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but you're in control of this whole process. AI on its own is not creative, correct?
Right. It's not creative, and there's a lot of good articles out there right now about why AI is never going to generate good art. And this is visual art, like paintings. And you can tell it, you can specify what it's sculpting, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, but
Mhm.
that's still human. You're still telling it what you want it to do. And you know, there's there's that element of perfection. I saw a piece on AI sculpting, and there's that element of perfection, which makes it just not human, I guess.
Mhm.
And I don't know how recognizable that is to everyone. It's interesting to try to recognize that. Like, is this, something that AI, with robots sculpted? Is it too perfect? Is it missing that kind of human piece?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I think that lack of humanity is what people maybe are afraid of and don't have words for. It's taking something away, I guess.
Mhm. When we were talking about AI, it's artificial intelligence is what it stands for. But I know, like in writing, when people, like I see stuff that is so clearly written by AI. And it really is just so obvious to me, but it's used all the time, right? To as a prompt. And I think part of my concern is that, and maybe this is the crux of it, is that it's not actually thinking. It's not actual intelligence. It's gathering and using prompts, right? So I think part of my concern is just sort of the bastardization of art, that it gets kind of that imperfection. Maybe we just get used to it not being there. Or do you know what I mean? Like maybe we just get used to it, and it's okay that computers make things that we don't really have a lot of input with.
Yeah, I think there's a level of it's funny, as someone who did web development, there's definitely a level of that already, and there was previous to AI, like when you're talking about digital art and images that you see on the web, um, because you think of all the websites you go to and the websites I used to build, there's always this template where it has an image and then it has a text, and then it's known that you need an image to draw people in and then text, and you're just trying to plug some sort of image to go in there. And so there was a lot of bad digital art anyways that was pretty meaningless
Mhm.
before AI. Now you can just make it quicker, I guess.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
So, there was a lot of low value images, and you can argue that now there's going to be even more, and it's proliferating the web, and it's out of control. But I don't see that as so much worse than it already was. Um,
Mhm.
and then when you talk about, fine art, good photography and paintings and sculpture, um, that's something that's you, it's not going to proliferate our lives in that particular way. Like, yes, our artists are going to use AI and already do for art that they sell and make and things, but still it's the human making the final call. Like, does that look right? Does it have a good composition? Is this worth printing? There's still some sort of human intervention and touch.
Well, I guess at the end of the day, it's a tool. Like a
Mhm.
digital camera is just a faster tool and skips a step. They're just tools.
Yeah. Yeah, you can totally look at it that way for sure. I know that there's a lot of, ethical questions about how AI was trained because Midjourney, for example, even though the materials that it trained on are proprietary and they don't say, but it uses data sets to be able to recognize things like the images that it trains on. So that's a mix usually of licensed images and also things that were scraped off the internet. So
Mhm.
that ownership thing.
Mhm.
That,
And that's a problem. That's a big problem. Actually, this might be a really good place to take a quick break and listen to some music because um, now we're getting into some areas that I think you're the perfect person to really educate us on, for example, ownership issues and copyright and all that kind of stuff. And so, if you don't mind hanging out, and I think even though it's really dark, I see a bottle of wine under your computer there. Is that something you're going to get a hold of here, Anne? So,
I was
you're
like,
li-
really?
you're listening to Dinner with Artists. I'm Rose Frederick here with Todd Pearson. We're going to be right back. Enjoy the music.
Welcome back to Dinner with Artists. I'm Todd Pearson here with my lovely co-host, Rose Frederick, and we're talking with the incredible painter, Anne Morgan, and her usage of AI as a tool in her work. Rose, you had a question that you really wanted
Yeah.
to address as far as copyright and
Mhm.
and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, you know what? This is a big issue, right? That artists, how do we protect our images and how do we protect our writing? And I know many artists whose images have been ripped off and reprinted, and they've sent cease and desist, and basically the person doing it just laughs at them and says, "Come and get me." So would you, Anne, because you're really in the middle of a lot of this and you're reading about it, could you kind of give us some updates on where all this stands and your thoughts on it too, which I think you were saying were a little unpopular.
Uh, this is something I haven't focused on this a lot lately, but the AI platforms, the creators, the owners has said basically like, yes, they've scraped the internet, they've used images from the internet, so they've used your images, which everyone knows. And how do you get value out of your images being used? That's a big question. Or, how upset are you going to be? And I'm of the mind, why my opinion is unpopular is because I just the internet is such, and it's been such for years and years and years and years, that people use your images. Once you put your images on the internet, you know, the copyright is yours. But as far as ownership, it's kind of not yours. It's out there. So, um, and that's just how it is. And I think maybe I'm more accepting of it than most, just having been in the tech world for so long. It's not, I'm not agreeing that it's okay to have taken everyone's images, but thinking about how they're used, it's not the way image generation uses your images that it's taken. It's not straight up just taking them and spitting them out and using them. It used it to train the model. So if it needs to learn what a dog is, for example. So it has images that are taken from the internet and also licensed probably of dogs. It's a neural network, so it's not going to have any context clues like a human would, like what a dog is.
Mhm.
So there's a big difference between a miniature poodle and a Great Dane. That's something that a human can jump to conclusions about, like that's a dog. I saw it with a family and a leash and all that. A neural network is not going to do that. So it has to train on all these images of dogs. And then when somebody sits down at an image generation program and asks for a dog, it's going to give them a dog, and then it can give them breeds of dogs if you further ask for it, because it's trained on all these images. So it's not necessarily the photo of your dog that you took. It trained on that in theory.
Right.
So it's not one-to-one. And it's same with artist styles. So you can AI knows who Vincent van Gogh is. So if you ask it to take a photo of yours and restyle it like a Van Gogh painting, it's going to. So that's theft if you think about it in one
Yeah.
way. But on the other, it's not going to make the missing Vincent van Gogh painting. No one's going to mistake that image for a Vincent van Gogh painting. So, it's a style. It's trained on a style. So it just depends. There's a lot of gray area for
Mhm.
sure. Why it's such a huge question.
Yeah, I think that I mean, to me, the tough thing is, the plagiarism side of it, because there are companies, and I'm just going to call it out, there are companies in China that steal images and just churn them out, and sculpture too, and they just churn out, and they're bad reproductions, but people buy them and they don't know, right? And because it's China, and they don't have our laws and they really don't care. So, it's that thing that gets really tough. And when you're trained in writing and in journalism, there are just these strict rules about crediting the source, and how you represent things. And it just sort of feels like the Wild West then, with AI and with scraping images and words and text and all of that. And so, one of the things I jotted down is, at first I was thinking, who polices it? But nobody is, and nobody's going to. It's gotten way too far. Like that was a thought for 20 years ago. So then I started wondering, maybe it really is in education of people. And here's art. Here's how this was made. Here's, like in your art, because if people are reading it and all of a sudden they come on AI and they're like, well, these aren't even hers, right? You've already had people say that to you, right? Like,
Really, it's really hard to argue with an oil painting, which is why
mm-hmm,
kind of an inside joke to my artwork. Like, yes, I
mm,
use AI, but then I make this very traditional oil painting with the same kind of paints that Vermeer used. So
sure, yeah,
there's something very funny about that. And
mm-hmm,
you also cannot argue like this, an oil painting is definitely fine art. And I made tons of decisions that had nothing to do with AI, just through the nature of painting. So it's making something very human with human decisions, with a inspiration or, a backbone or a sketch using
Right.
AI.
I
So,
have no, go ahead, finish what you're saying.
that's definitely a twist on things.
Mm-hmm.
For security and policing, what I'm thinking is, back in the day, um, it was very easy to steal software. Not that I did that, wink, but very easy to steal software. You would download it, and then there were lots of illegal serial code crackers, from Russia that you could find and get into software and be able to use it. And learn whatever was going on, even though you didn't have the money to spend on that particular software. But through the years, it's become more secure. And I don't think it's because I can now afford the software that I think that it's very hard to do the same thing and crack into serial codes for software. And plus it has subscriptions now. So there's lots of different things that have happened through those years to up the security and police that kind of theft. And I think it's going to be the same with AI because the image generation and that's a lot of gray areas. And something that's not a gray area is being able to go to ChatGPT and get the same article from the New York Times that you would normally have to pay for with a subscription. That's straight up theft.
Right.
Which is aided by, and I think they're working on trying to shore up those holes. But I think it's just this is always what happens with technology is there's that bleeding edge where things happen and then you have to shore it up, after it happens to figure out how to stop theft. So it's happened tons of times. I think it'll just happen again.
Right.
One
That's
thing,
interesting because, well, like you were talking about that new streaming service for music that, I mean, music is a classic case of
Right.
Napster, right? And then that revolutionized everything with subscription services. But Todd, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of step it back just a little bit because one thing I want to make sure that our listeners are able to grasp is I want to differentiate the way that you use AI and like the mass populace because you actually mentioned early on in the interview that you made your own model, that you feed it imagery, if I remember correctly, that is yours or that you have permission to use. Talk about that, the way that you have made your own model and how it plays into the process and the way you use it.
And remember, some of us still believe that unicorn tears run the internet. So
They do. Um, there are it a lot of AI platforms are out there where you can train your own model. So you take your own images, and a lot of these are to do like professional photos. So you take a bunch of images and selfies that you have of yourself, you load them in, and then it will train on those and recognize your face, and then put you in a suit and in a professional setting, and you can use those for LinkedIn. There's a lot of those. And basically what I did was that, but it wasn't as directed as that. There was an open model you could train in Runway ML. So I took all my landscape photos because I do abstract landscapes and virtual and realistic. I had all those kinds of images on my computer that I had kept. And all you do is you format them so they're all the same shape. So it's easier for the network to recognize what it is. And I use the keyword landscape. And you feed it into the computer and it trains on that set. So recognize what a landscape is. A landscape is something that looks like one of those photos that I added into the data set, my data set. And now I can text prompt. So a landscape, but, or a landscape and it's cloudy, it's rainy, it's foreboding, just very descriptive words of what I want. And my results are based on that data set, so my own images. And it's a small set, so a lot of times I will get something that's recognizable. So they're not fantastic images. Like I would never use the results as a final image. They're just kind of flat and very early internet looking almost sometimes. But I will see recognizable places in them, like places I've been, like the photos I've had, and sometimes I'll get something bizarre and not in my data set at all. Like one time I got a hill from one of my camping trips. I remembered, I was like, oh, hey, there's that weird hill I took a picture of. And then this giant moon that I had no idea where it came from. So it was, there's those surprises that make it worth it to text prompt and see what happens. And it's an interesting meditation because that particular photo, like it wasn't exact. I projected it onto my canvas and obviously painted it, but that photo prompted one of my better paintings. Like that giant moon out of nowhere just really made me think.
So this is like you have developed a second art brain.
It's like it's my little creative brainstorming group, except the other brain is not human.
Yeah. Okay, that's really cool. So, before my brain explodes, I think we should take a break for some music. Todd's like, I think it exploded hours ago. I'm Rose Frederick with Todd Pearson. We're chatting with Ann Morgan. We'll be right back. Enjoy the music.
Welcome back to Dinner with Artists. I'm Todd Pearson here with Rose Frederick, and we're continuing our conversation with painter Ann Morgan. Now, Ann, you're talking about how you feed these prompts into your own model using your own imagery. And it's still a lot of trial and error. You said that sometimes it spits out stuff that you're like, I'm not going to use that, right?
Right.
How often does this happen, and how much of that is trial and error?
I it's a lot of trial and error to get the right prompt if you're looking for something in particular. And especially not with my own model, but with Midjourney or another image generation program, learning the right prompts. And there's help around the internet, there's tutorials, learning the correct way to ask for things. There's lots of different types of images you can ask for with the right prompt. I think, the person who won the Colorado, there was a person who won with an image that was generated by Midjourney for the some sort of fair.
Yeah, I
I forget
remember
the
that.
entire
I
story.
can't remember either, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think they said that their prompt was something like 900 words or 900 characters. I forget what it was, but it was a really, really long prompt. Something you can do with AI prompts is, just continuing to build and continuing to build on that same image. Image generation, it will keep building on something that it's already made. For my personal model, it's really small, so it's pretty limited what kind of results I can get. So a lot of times I'll just write poems, or I will write how I'm feeling that day or something random. Like I just kind of play with it and just make sure that I have the keyword landscape in there and see what happens. And sometimes I get the flat digital images that aren't interesting, and sometimes I get something wild like that big moon or weird bent trees or just some sort of environment I'm kind of scared of. Just you never know what you're going to get. And I feel like playing with those text prompts and writing kind of the nonsense almost that I write sometimes just makes it interesting.
It just struck me as you were saying that about the nonsense and all these things, and that they just keep building on this. I suddenly could picture you as a little girl and getting those Xerox copies from your dad and kept going and going. And it just made me think, oh my God, this is why this makes sense to Anne, because you've been seeing the world this way since you were a little kid.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And also that iterative building,
Hmm.
building and building is definitely, that's web development and scripting languages. Build something, see if it works, check it out, go back, that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's a process where my mind feels comfortable. That's a
Yeah.
good
Wow.
for me.
So at this point, and I know you've been doing this for a while, um, how many images do you have in your current model? Do you know?
I still only have like 300 images in that original model.
Well,
And then
that surprises me. I just thought there would be a few more zeros on the end of there.
yeah, it's a very small data set. And
What,
usually,
why do you keep it so small?
um, that's my original data set and
Mhm.
I haven't fine-tuned it. I haven't added any more.
Hmm.
Just, I really like having that original data set. I don't know why. It's part of the process. And then I've been looking at different platforms to build that kind of data set again to do some more fine tuning and add some of the images I've gotten from the other. But I really don't want to add my AI images that I've generated to a model that then generates more AI images.
Hmm.
I want to make sure that I keep those all original,
Hmm.
as actual photos. Just I feel like, they're already flat. That would definitely make the results flatter and worse.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. That makes sense. Hey, I have a question. So you call yourself a nature painter or based in nature and landscape. But when I look at your work and having this whole conversation in my head about AI and modeling and all of that kind of stuff, they're very abstract, right? And so I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about being a nature inspired and a landscape painter. And if we just sort of pull the technology out of it, what is that for you and what draws you to that subject matter?
I I think I paint from, it's not like actual nature. It's more, virtual reality, digital nature,
Mhm.
um, that idea of nature. And there's a couple reasons, like I like the reason why I chose nature or that particular digital reality is for the absence of humans. So you're the only human in the scene is when you're looking at it. And there might be evidence that humans were there, or there's always the idea of humans in a landscape, even if they aren't present. But I like that idea of some sort of reality where humans aren't the central piece. Like
Mhm.
you as the viewer are the human, the single human in that particular piece. And it's based on, you know, that sort of virtual presence where, you're the only human working on your computer. And a lot of times you're the only human in a game.
Mhm.
So it's that sort of presence. And landscape inspires me, it just, the organic shapes, but also I read recently that AI is the collective memory, and I'm really interested in that collective memory, but also that it's remembering things in nature that might not be here for very much longer. And that's, you know, different types of trees or trees at all with the fires. So I'm just I'm really focused on some sort of idealized nature that maybe never existed, because that's kind of the position we're working ourselves in.
I feel
And
like
that
you're
leads me,
my, oh, I was just going to say, I feel like you're my sister in sci-fi. Go, Todd.
and this leads me back to a quote that I had read where you said that your work is about nature, but it's not, and that you really consider these environments. Is
Mhm.
that
Mm.
correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's a digital realism, which I think is our reality more now than you know what is out there in the world, especially when I started painting again. It was the pandemic, like months later. So that whole idea of not going outside and having more of a digital reality than a physical reality really struck me.
And I
And
think a lot of people have that
Yeah.
anymore, right? I mean,
Yeah.
here we are talking on Zoom.
Yeah, this is digital reality is reality at this
Mhm.
point. So um, there's that's what my paintings are about.
I wonder if, could I ask you about a painting in particular that when I go through your website, I keep stopping on this one, and it's called The Inevitable Moon. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
It is
Is
I
that
quite
lo
it?
I
not that you can
love
see
I
it.
love that you pulled that up because that is one of my favorite new pieces. And I was going to
Hmm.
talk about a different piece just because uh, I kind of had a little bit of discussion with Anne about that. But I'm glad you brought that up, Rose.
Okay, good. And it's from a series Once When I Was You. Would you just tell me about this painting?
So this painting, it's been a lot of different paintings, but this past summer, I spent almost a month with my parents in Michigan in my childhood room that looks exactly
Oh,
like I left it when I was there,
oh.
because I
Are
ended
your
up
roller skates still there?
all of my drawings from art class. It was
Wow.
so pink. And, you know, I spent, my bed is still there. And it's funny, I'm not a very big person, and I had this little tiny bed there. And I decided I'm a goldfish. I can only grow as big as my bed. But I
That
still
was a that must have been the plan of your parents. I know how we'll keep her.
but anyways, I was there, and I spent time looking out of the window at the moon, um, and thinking. And it's just, this painting is definitely about that past life of being a little girl. And it's got all the cliche things
Mm.
that a little girl loves, like neon pink. It's got it in there. It's got gold. It's got shiny. And the blue of the water is Tiffany box blue. So, you know, it's a very particular shade, which I grabbed from an actual Tiffany box and mixed it up. I really wanted the color to reference that kind of feeling I had back in my childhood room, and then also, you know, being a child in that room. And the painting became that. Like, it wasn't, that was not my plan when I first made the painting. I just was working on moon images based on some results that I got from my AI model, um, which kept spitting out moons at me for a while. And then it just became this during the process of painting in those layers and layers and layers, and then taking a break and going to my parents' house and coming back and
Mm.
finishing this up. It just, it changed completely. So yeah, it's interesting that.
Was the thought that was, were you thinking about going to your parents and then you go there and then you come back and things change? Or had you started this and then being in your old room with your parents, then you came back and saw this fresh and reworked it?
I saw it fresh and reworked it. Like, I had started and there was a moon in it. And then I left, and I had no, I didn't know I was going to be at my parents that long. And it was just, it was one of those, it was a very intense break because, you know, being in your childhood room when you're 51 years old and it hasn't changed a bit since you were 18 years old is pretty weird.
Yeah, yeah.
It really triggered a lot of thinking. So when I came back, I definitely wanted to reference that kind of mind break. And and it was funny, like the moon was already there in the painting, and it was sketched in underlayer, and it was bright red. It was something that was based off a digital sketch I had built, and then it changed to this over time. And I kept, my process was I kept taking photos of it and bringing it home and then working on it in Photoshop and kind of layering things on and then going back and projecting and then finding different things. And for the last, to finish it up, I didn't project at all. So it was, just working on top of all those layers.
I think it's always amazing when, either I watch people just kind of get pulled in by a work of art, and I'm always curious to hear what is drawing them in. And it's always something personal. And for me, with this painting, not knowing that, and I wouldn't say, oh, I just love that color blue, or I love that, or that moon idea or whatever. But I think it's how personal this painting is for you that it just really speaks something about it, that it speaks.
I always I like having open-ended paintings. Like it's not something I work towards necessarily, but it kind of is where it's abstract enough or, not detailed enough or just not a particular something enough so people can bring their own stories to it. And that's what fascinates me is when people say this reminds me of, and then they have their own story of something that it triggered. And I feel like a lot of times something I do intentionally is bring out colors that I think will reference things like the Tiffany blue. And in one of my the large painting, What We Remember, the water is very, referencing the Great Lakes, and the St. Clair River, which is where I was near when I was at my parents' house. And just with a color story, you can reference a lot of memories.
Yeah, I
Hey,
think so. Yeah.
at that point, I want to talk a little bit more about this work, but should we take a quick break and
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
back and have more discussion about it?
Yeah. Let's digest a little bit on that one. That's fabulous. Yeah, let's take a little break. We'll be right back. Dinner with Artists.
Welcome back to Dinner with Artists. I'm here with Rose Frederick, my compadre, and I'm
Hey,
Todd
Todd.
Pearson. Hi, Rose. And we're talking with Anne Morgan about AI and her process and her work. We're talking about current work that she recently completed. I want to talk a little bit more about What We Remember. Um, you talked a little bit about what it references, but the thing that I notice about this newer work is it seems it's definitely evolving from my perspective of what I've seen previous, and I'm actually babysitting one of your paintings currently at one of at my house. One of my houses. No, I only have one house. One of your paintings at my house. Don't get the wrong impression. Um, this work feels definitely more personal, but it also has a much softer feel from the work that I've seen previous. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're totally correct. Um, I think my first paintings, obviously they weren't my first paintings, but my first paintings after coming back, um, I was referencing what I'd been doing for the last 20 years, which was sitting in front of a very flat screen, I think. Um, and I was really focused on color fields and line in a different way. And I stuck more to my digital sketches and what I projected. So those paintings, they definitely have a different feeling than now I still do the projection process. They're still based off of my digital sketches, but I spend a lot more time painting between the layers. I spend more time, trying to work on depth beyond the screen and lighting. And a lot of times I will paint one completely different digital sketch on top of another in the dark and just to see what happens. So there are a lot more, I'm spending a lot more time knitting the images together that I've randomly put on top of each other sometimes. And I'm just spending more time being a painter, if that makes sense, just getting to know the materials again and just seeing the power of oil paint. There's a reason beyond, like, yes, it's an inside joke that I use oil paint for AI images and digital images. Like it's quite funny, I guess, to me. But there's power in oil paint that I haven't found in any or other medium. It stays wet for longer. You can do lots of layers and transparency, and there's metallics and all sorts of like really fun process things that I learned about when I was much younger. And just spending time inside of that has been, that it's been joyful actually. And it's just allowing myself to go into that space has been, that's been a process in itself.
Could you talk about, you've mentioned it several times and I keep writing it down to ask you. Could you talk about painting in the dark? Like how dark? And then do you paint for a while and turn on the lights and go, oh, for God's sakes, or what, like what happens?
I so I will I usually print out a digital sketch that I have as a file that I'll end up projecting. And I'll mix some of the colors in that digital sketch and have like an idea of where they go. Then make sure I know where they are, and I'll turn the lights and project, and I can kind of see what colors I'm using.
Mm.
But I really like that process of kind of losing myself. It 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 loosens me up. It makes me not think about so hard about what I'm doing, I guess. And it's very automatic, and obviously, I do a fair amount of tracing, but then, there's enough light from the projector to kind of see different things and to follow that. And then I'll turn on the lights and see what happened. And yes, sometimes it's like, oh no, especially if I'm painting on top of something. But I feel like that really it loosens me up. It makes me not it gets me more into the process of painting and kind of reacting to what's there rather than what I want to be there, which is important, I think, because paint's going to do what paint's going to do to a certain effect. And I think it looks better when you allow it to be paint rather than trying to force it into something.
Mhm.
So that's definitely a process that allows me to be able to do that.
That made me think of an artist. He's deceased, but he lived all over the country and most famously in Los Angeles, friends with Motherwell. And his name was Emerson Wolfer. And he was quite well known for his automatic paintings. And they were in response to something. And, and they're abstract and they're some of my favorite abstractions. And he had a lot of tribal art that he had collected over the course of his life as well. And that kind of, he responded to it. But like until I read that he had tribal art, I would not have said, oh, he's riffing off tribal art any more than I would say, without knowing you, oh, these are totally AI generated, right? But I love that idea of automatic painting, the responding, like a call and response, maybe.
Yeah, I feel definitely like it's automatic painting, but in a different way. Projecting isn't something that people would think is automatic, because you have lines to follow, but it is. And I really I like the history that's there behind, the spiritualism and
Mhm.
Hilma Abclamp, and there's several others. who did that kind of thing. So I kind of feel like I'm referencing AI a little bit as my magic 8 ball, or my spirit that has no body, and then painting
I like that.
that.
You've talked in terms of it being some form of meditation, um, and it's obviously intuitive, even though you're using a source to project stuff. It's all coming from inside of you, correct? Um, the other word I heard you use numerous times during this interview is joy. Talk about that a little bit.
I think well, I know when I quit, I was very burned out from my previous job for a number of reasons. It
When
was a
you
pretty,
quit, when you quit computer science or painting?
when I quit my job at an association, I had a
Mhm.
technical position.
Mhm.
Uh, I was looking for joy uh, again in my life, which sounds, I guess that sounds more serious than it actually was, but it's important to find that kind of joy. And I was in a spot in my life where I felt like I had lost a lot of the joy that I used to have in learning new things and building websites, teaching skills, all the things that I did, during my, professional career. And I still do those things by contract. Like I still do contract web development, and I did my own website and all that stuff. But painting and making art is a joy that I don't think any of the other things can compare to, at least for me. And so finding that again was really, really important.
Between your social media posts, which I do pay attention to, by the way, and our conversations that we've had in the past year, it seems like and then looking at this new work, especially What We Remember, and I would like you to maybe elaborate a little bit more on that particular piece, but it seems like you're at a place of introspection these days. Is that true?
It is totally true. I think, well, I'm 51 now, but approaching 50, a lot of things happened at once where I was feeling really burned out, and I, quit my full-time job and started painting again. I was going to turn 50. Just, trying to make sense of it. It seemed like I needed to make sense of all the things that have happened previous to me. And I am introspective right now, and spending that amount of time with my parents, just kind of, it was like I fell through a crack in time right into my past. So I think it really changed my paintings after that particular point. And what we remember is the first piece that I worked on when I got back from that trip. And it was two completely different paintings, which I had started and abandoned because they weren't going anywhere. And I came back and I put them together, and I just painted both of them out with that blue color underneath, and kind of got the shape going. So that particular painting has probably the least projection that I've done, and the least digital work that I've done out of all of my pieces. And it became a really specific memory for me of being 6 and my parents building the house, which I had spent all that time in, um, and me being an only child and having nothing to do and just being out in this field and tying the tops of weeds together and kind of seeing it through, like seeing the sky through this tunnel of weeds that I had tied together and immediately had an allergic reaction to. It was just kind of wheezing because that's who I am. But um, like spending all that time made me very introspective, and recall a lot of visual memories that were tied to landscape. Um, and, that painting became very important to me, like painting out that memory and then having it dump you on the right side, right into the St. Clair River, basically, which is, that's in the town that I grew up in, and my dad was a sailor on the Great Lakes. So that whole history of water and that particular body of water is very prevalent in my mind, um, especially after that trip back to my parents. So that painting, what we remember is, it's what I remember. It's what, people that grew up around me remember as well. So it's just very, that painting is really special to me. So, and I think it's, you're not supposed to have favorites, but I think that's my favorite painting I've made to date.
I think it's magnificent, and there's so much going on in there, and there's so much push and pull, it feels like some yin and yang. You got the right side that feels very tumultuous, but the left side feels very serene. So like there's this thing going on in it that I don't know. I would have to say that that is probably my favorite that I've seen of your work thus far, and yeah, it just evokes so much emotion inside of me. Like I can feel that emotion coming off the canvas, and I'm just looking at it. Well, I've seen it in your studio, but I don't think I saw it in its present state. So, but yeah, fantastic.
I think it's interesting too, like the tumultuous part, and you explaining that your father was, a mariner, was on the lakes all the time, and so and those lakes are like the ocean. They can be really violent and scary, and that now makes more sense with that painting to me. These references from being home for you, and I'm looking at some of these paintings like Sleeper and The Landing, and these really vibrant colors that are coming out in them. It just looks like it was so much fun to paint, for one thing, but two, it also, these some of these paintings just feel like they just explode with energy. Are there stories behind some of these, or is it just really the reaction to what your AI model is kind of throwing down?
I really enjoy making my color story and references very digitally based, which is not the easiest thing with oil paints. Oil paints want to really be natural colors for the most part. Um, is- so it's fun to kind of challenge what those oil paints want to be sometimes. And a lot of my earlier, well, a lot of my work, it is quite joyful. Like and it has a lot of energy because it takes a lot of energy to make those big paintings. Like I'm not sitting, I'm definitely standing and running around the studio, and I have to mix giant batches of paint to kind of get across the canvas because I don't paint in thin layers. So I think the paintings definitely look like the process.
That's good. Yeah, they're really just lively. So with the size, like not a lot of people have a space for a 60 by 72-inch painting. Does that kind of, I mean, clearly it's not going to stop you from really spreading out and doing these, but I mean, I would imagine people might say, "Hey, can you do it in a smaller size?"
I had to
Yeah.
build a whole new wing on my house to
Just to
babysit
babysit one.
to babysit
Smaller.
a painting of Anne's.
It's only 5'4". Um, 5'4". I think, well, I think people have more room for that kind of work than they would expect because a vertical painting that's 5 foot tall, 4 foot wide will fit in a smaller space than you would expect. Um, and I have them all over my house if anybody wants to look. But for the larger paintings, I know people don't have that kind of space, but I really, really like that's how I paint. So
Mhm.
guess I'm willing to not I'm willing. I kind of have to paint like that. I don't feel like what we remember would be the painting that it is
Mhm.
any smaller than it is. So I do, I have prints for sale. I do prints, which, obviously isn't the same as a painting, but
Mhm.
if a lot of times that's what works. You see a painting in real life and you want it and you buy a print and that's totally reasonable. And I suppose I would, I could repaint paintings at a smaller scale, but it's just, it's just how I paint. So
Yeah.
I can compromise. Like it would feel like a compromise to work smaller. And
Well,
I
and
don't.
why bother? I mean, that's not the life of an artist, right?
Well, you do want to make some sales, and people who love your work but don't have the space or can't afford something larger. Like I do wish sometimes I did paint smaller, or at least made studies or something like that. But the weird thing is my digital mock-ups and my digital sketches are my studies, and I don't spend a lot of time painting on anything small. And I would say the successful small paintings I've had, which are very few, are takeaways from my bigger paintings. So I'd be like, I really like that spot in that painting. I want to do it again. And
That makes
so,
sense.
yeah, so I've been doing that a little bit more often than I have previously, but.
Hey, Anne, so I mean, aside from seeing things on your website, which is annemorgan.art, where can people see these in person? And of course at Todd's home, which we'll put the address in the notes.
There you go.
You can always contact me through Instagram and schedule a studio visit. My studio is in Lakewood, and I'm very open to that. I am represented by a gallery in Crested Butte, and I have shows occasionally.
Which gallery? Which gallery, Crested Butte?
RA Modern.
Say it one more time, would you?
RA Modern.
RA Modern?
Gallery.
Okay. RA Modern Gallery in Crested Butte, Colorado. Okay. Or at the studio. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a show scheduled in 2026 in the state of Washington. So I have a few things coming up, but they're a little bit,
a little out there, a little farther out. I could see your work in in corporate collections and lobbies and stuff, just where it can really spread out with some big windows across from it and things like that.
It's quite large. I actually, I had forgotten about this until this moment, but in 2022, I had some pieces in Art Prize, which is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's the largest juried art show in the nation. And those paintings that were there went to live at my friend's winery. So you can stay at Fen Valley Winery in Michigan and stay in a house with two of my paintings.
There you go. And that sounds actually like where we should do our next podcast, Todd.
Let's do it.
All right. Because it is dinner with artists. And what goes better with dinner than wine?
And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about your work, your process, and educating us a little bit more about artificial intelligence, which I think is a very misunderstood topic these days. And, this technology as it evolves, it's good to educate ourselves. And so it's nice to talk to somebody that actually knows about it and is actually utilizing it.
Yeah, and can explain it to us and take I think there's a lot of fear around it and a lot of misconceptions. So I'm Rose Frederick here with my dear friend. I'm so glad you're here with me, Todd Pearson. This is so great.
This is fun. This is really fun.
And you are a trooper. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Oh, thank you. It's fun.
Really? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Hey, we're going to take another quick break and then we're coming back with the news around the art world from near and far. Hang out, people.
I'm excited.
We'll be right back. Dinner with Artists.
All right, this is a segment called News Near and Far on Dinner with Artists,
Yeah.
where we talk about art news from around the world and maybe give out our 2 cents
Or
about
3.
things that we've seen and heard, or 3.
3 cents.
Yeah,
Because you get extra here. It's
a
dinner.
nickel for your thoughts.
Pennies. Who has pennies? Okay. So, you know what? All right. I've got a headline here. Charles Darwin's grave defaced by climate protesters at Westminster Abbey. We've talked about this. You know what? People ask me about this a lot. Rose, what do you think about that? And, like protesters glue their hand to a wall or they throw paint on a great work of art. And okay, these things can be reversed. They can be fixed. If somebody burns something, it's definitely gone. But look, this is everybody's art. And, these people are trying to get massive corporations to make a change. And I remember reading one young activist comment about throwing tomato soup on art in the Tate Museum. And, and she was like, hey, I'm the only way to get rich people's attention is to, destroy something that they love or, and it made me so angry because this art and even a gravestone in Westminster Abbey or, all of this is for us, for the people. And some museums charge to get in, some are free, a lot are free. And you know what? This work has survived for hundreds of years and some artifacts for thousands of years. And God dang it, it's for everybody. And I just, this is my soapbox. I just think when you try to ruin something that it doesn't matter how much money you have. I don't have the money of some big oil corporation. I'm me. I'm a curator. I go see art everywhere and it makes me happy and I find joy in it. And you're stealing that from me to make some point. Right?
Right. I mean, I think it's you definitely want to make some kind of impact, but I think people go at it the wrong way a lot of times. I get people are mad about health insurance, but shooting somebody
Oh my
probably
God.
isn't the best road to travel. Like I disagree with it.
Yeah.
I think it's a generational thing though too, Rose. Like us being from a different generation, it seems like most of the stuff that's being done is from a younger generation and they have a different mindset. Now, I would be curious to talk to some of these people and see, what is their mindset? What is the idea behind this? But I'm with you, like destroying precious pieces of art that are for everybody that are displayed publicly. I think that's the wrong way to go about things. Like, I think there's other ways to go about it, but there's plenty of people that I think it's coming to a tipping point in some way. I just saw an article earlier today about and I can't remember the musician's name off the top of my head, but pretty much advocating for more violence, saying that,
Oh, geez.
maybe the route to go is shooting CEOs of companies. I don't know. And I don't have a solution, but I do disagree with throwing tomato soup or spray painting something or, somehow desecrating a piece of art that's been around for centuries or what have you. It makes no sense in my mind.
Well, you know what though? Okay, so you said something about an age. These two women in the photo are older than we are.
Oh, really? Okay. All
Yeah.
right. I was thinking it was a generational thing,
Yeah.
like it was a younger younger people that were doing this particular thing, but okay.
No, they're older. And okay, you know what? Here's the frustrating thing for me. And I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole too far, but we're all using a lot of energy, right?
Right.
Right.
You're,
Okay.
nobody's
So,
riding a horse. I do know a
no,
guy that rides his bike. That's all public
yeah,
transportation and bike.
I
And
do too.
that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
exactly. Exactly right. And the technology is moving not as fast as some people would like it to move, but it is moving. But destroying art and destroying a gravestone that is not pushing anything forward. In fact, you look like a lunatic and you're stealing something precious to me who look, I feel the urgency too. But I'm not going to deprive other people of beauty and joy and a connection with the human race and what we've done and what people have done through the years and this history, good and bad. It just I don't know. It's just it feels pretty hypocritical to me too.
I agree. If you drove your car to desecrate a grave or the Mona Lisa, guess
Right.
what?
Yeah.
You're a
Right.
hypocrite.
Right. And how about this? If you even got on a bus, you're a hypocrite. And okay, your clothing that has plastic all over it and woven through it, and your shoes and your toothbrush, and I mean, we can really go all the way down this path. And you are using each person uses so much stuff. Your Ziploc bags, and how
Water
about
bottles,
right,
whatever.
right, right. How about make a difference in your home? Start there and start advocating and start looking for solutions to the problems we have instead of creating more problems on top of it. Oh no.
The
We're
world
gonna have to
definitely has its problems, right? But at the same
Mhm.
time, try to be part of the solution and not part of the
Yeah.
problem.
Right? Right. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully you have better news.
I do. But before we pivot to this other one,
Oh.
and speaking of like climate change and maybe the
Mm-hmm.
oil and gas industry, I want to highlight something that I've recently glommed onto in my watching of television. And
Oh.
it's a show called Landman starring
Oh.
Billy Bob Thornton.
I have
And
heard about this one.
whatever you may think about Taylor Sheridan and his writing and all the shows that he's doing right now, it
Hmm.
is very well written, and it really does paint a picture. I think, there's always going to be those anomalies that people, go, oh, that's not right. That's not the way it is,
Sure.
correct in the oil field, the patch, what they call it. But I will say this: it is an interesting insight into how we operate as a country in this world and the oil and gas industry, and how it does still play a very major part in everybody's lives.
Hmm.
The dialogue is impeccable. Billy Bob Thornton is off the charts, and I have an affinity for him just because I think he's
Mm.
a fantastic actor. Everything I've ever seen him in, I think he does a great job.
Yeah.
The characters are compelling. And I think it's just a little peek into a world that a lot of people, unless you live in Texas and live in a
Mm.
place where oil and gas are a major industry, you don't really have a clue. It's
Mm.
like going to the store and buying meat, right? Like you have no idea. You just see this package, this pretty package of meat or whatever, but you don't really
Right.
know the whole process of what led up to that package of meat that you're buying that you're going to consume.
Right.
Same thing when you're filling up your gas tank. You're not thinking about people that are actually doing the work or the industry as a whole, probably. All you're thinking about is, holy crap,
I'm late.
gas is really high right now. Or,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
it just went down 30 cents.
Right.
Those are things that we kind of, it's very topical. We put out of our
Hmm.
minds. And, we'd probably be all better for it if we had a little bit better understanding of where things come from and how things are produced, right?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, I think education is always a huge solution to the problem.
Absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
it's one thing that, at least in this country, and I think we had a conversation the other day about this because you were
Hmm.
talking to an artist that lives in Germany, and he was talking about how different the news, what we
Yeah.
get
Hmm.
fed and digest in this country, how much it differs from what other countries get and what
Hmm.
they see.
You know, and that's actually we should get him on the podcast, Ulrich Glider, and you know, just get an update on what's going on there because he studied at the Repin Institute in St. Petersburg, and you know, and so he's living in Germany. He's German and he floats all around Europe, but he's so he's so upset about the war and all of that, and that in Ukraine, and was telling us we don't get anywhere near the news coverage and know anywhere near what's going on. So yeah, I think that's you know,
I think that'd
uh,
be interesting.
yeah, and I am definitely not somebody who goes off on the media. I think that there's so much news out there that it's really up to me and up to you to sort through it and with a level head and not get your news off Facebook.
Well, as someone that has worked in the media for over 25 years, I will just
Mm,
say this. It's ludicrous on a lot of levels, at least American media, and everybody that works for a media outlet, whatever that may be,
mm,
knows that that's a fact, that it's more entertainment, it's more
yeah,
spin than it is actually informing people.
yeah. Well, headlines grab, right? It just grabs. And so everybody's looking for that grabby headline to get you to read and stay on their page. And
Yeah, clickbait.
yeah. So, I mean, it's really up to us. It's
Yeah.
up to us to read it and, you know.
And have a discussion about it. Like this
Hmm.
is where I think having discourse, having conversation with your community, your neighbors, whatever that looks like, whatever your
Yeah.
community is, I think that's always a good thing. Like talk it
Right.
out. And then who knows? Maybe that causes you to take action in some way,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
hopefully in a positive way, right?
Pause it. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, why can't we disagree with each other without it coming to blows or I'm never talking to you again? Or how do you advance society if you don't disagree and figure out a way to come together with it? I mean, I think it's what we're seeing in our government today that to me is scary. Like, yeah, disagree, but figure it out for God's sakes, you know?
Yeah.
Like, aren't we paying you to figure some stuff out over there? I'm paying you a lot in taxes. I'll just say that. I mean, as a sole proprietor, it's a
Figure,
lot.
yeah. Figure out how to come together and work out a solution
Right,
on some level.
right. All right. You have another
All right,
headline.
my headline for this week. This comes from Art News. Philip Auction House reports 843 million in sales for 2024, with auction figures down 14% from previous year.
Yeah.
Um, the disappointing numbers come as other large auction houses report similarly
Hmm.
depressed sales totals compared to prior years. Now, I know in discussion with you and other galleries that election years tend to be difficult years as far as
Mm,
selling art.
really, really notoriously bad.
And
Hmm.
that's because people are unsure of what the future
Hmm.
holds. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting thing because as we've talked about, you can't live necessarily under a painting and you can't eat it and you can't drive it, right? Like it serves more of a spiritual value, you know, in your life. And when I say spiritual, I don't mean church. It's fulfills something in your soul, right? And it makes your world more beautiful or enjoyable or, interesting or whatever. But, so when people feel good about the amount of money they have and good about the direction of the country, and they will buy art. They'll buy something that makes them happy, that makes their home more beautiful, or they'll support an artist they love, right? But because you don't need paintings to get to work, right? So people will cut back. That's an easy one to cut out of your budget. And really, in election years, it is that uncertainty. But the crazy thing is that once the election is decided, it doesn't matter which candidate wins or what the thinking is. It's like, okay, well, now we know. Let's figure out where to put our money, or let's figure out, but we know, so we can move forward with it. This year's been really strange because we all expected kind of a bounce once people settle down. And that hasn't really happened. Like, sales are starting to come back again, but not like they usually do. And I would just speculate that, and this was before the fires in Los Angeles. So before that scary big destruction, and now we're all looking over our insurance policies, which you should do. It still hadn't bounced back. And so I think people just are reading these headlines every day and thinking, whether you voted for him or not, I don't know what this guy's going to do. Right?
So typically right after the election, after the results are in, things settle down and it's business as usual, but you're not really seeing that, at least not yet, in the market.
Not yet. Not yet. Now, okay, so I will say this too, inflation. And I mean, because I would like to refinance my mortgage, I've been looking at those interest rates and watching inflation get under control over the summer, and things were starting to look good and rates went down a little bit. But when Trump won, rates started to go back up for long-term loans. And what I heard, the reason was because everything he's saying he's going to do, or a lot of what he's saying is he's going to do, is going to require money that will have to be borrowed on long term. And so those interest rates have gone back up in speculating that that's what's going to happen. So that's affected all of our, rates. And so, now we're just going to sit tight and wait. So everybody's like, it's like everybody's hedging bets. And it's just that kind of uncertainty is not good in the art market. It's still moving. Art is still moving, thankfully. But yeah, it's just been, it's been interesting. And interest rates and shaky economies, it's global. I mean, China's having a really tough time. The UK, Germany, this is global. So I think we just have to really kind of hang on for the ride.
Now, if you have a lot of money, are those people that do have a lot of money, are they still, does it matter as far as the economy is concerned, whether or not they're buying artwork?
They are buying. They're also remodeling homes. They're also, buying another car. They're traveling. And I will say travel, it has, in my opinion, eaten into art sales. So because people couldn't take those trips during COVID, and now they're going. I mean, I went to Barcelona in June last year, and over Thanksgiving, I went to Florence. And Florida, that was in November, so Europe was a little quieter, but Barcelona was packed. It was nuts. And people were traveling. So many people were traveling. And I think they still are, and the planes are full. And those ticket prices are unreal to get on a plane. So, I think that's taken a big bite out of, that money that went to art. So I'm just my hope for 2025 is that things settle down and that people start to, just get Trump in, get his picks. I mean, you and I feel the same way about this, but it's coming. So just get it in, get it going, see what's going to happen. And then I think people will hopefully start to feel better about it.
Yeah. Hopefully there's a little bit more of a equilibrium struck, right? I don't live, you kind of touched on it, we both kind of feel the same way, but I don't live in fear. Like I see a lot of social media posts and I get people are upset or whatever, but it's just like, you know what? Wait until things happen. Let's see how it shakes out.
Right.
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 I'm always try to, keep pretty hopeful for the future and optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, well, okay, you can be pessimistic or optimistic. It's going to happen anyway.
Right.
So I pick optimism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm hoping 2025 is a great year and
Yeah.
we'll see how it shakes out. In the
Yeah.
meantime, we'll just keep on talking to interesting people and talk art and
I think we should do that.
feed our heads, feed our brains.
Yeah, because art, you know what? Art makes you smart.
Art makes you smart. Did you come up with that?
No, Bob Ragland did.
Oh, there you go. You got a Raglanism in there.
I got
Fantastic.
a Raglanism in there.
Wherever you are, Bob, we love
Bob, we love you. Yeah. All right, my friend, this has been absolutely lovely. I really appreciate it.
you. Yeah.
Glad you're on
me
board.
Too. I am too. It's a lot of fun and I can't wait till the next one.
I know. Me too. All right, my friend. Well, until then, bon appetit.
I'll see you at the table.
It sounds good.